Yeah, and you teach all. I guess I mean a lot of people like. I guess that a lot of things that I get shared for about yours are like about meaning and looking into meaning.
Yes,
and especially at a time where it feels like people are, or for me even. I mean, it feels like we're getting into this cul-de-sac in America where it's like, is there a lot of value to my life? Am I just a cog in the wheel? Am I just a consumer? Is there any, what is the purpose for me? I think a lot of people are starting to ask themselves that.
Yeah. I call that the meaning crisis. And I think there's good evidence that it's becoming very prevalent in the West, whatever that means these days, but sort of North America, Europe, Japan,
Hawaii,
Australia, things like that. And the symptoms are, you can sort of see symptoms of it all through the culture, and I've also seen a significant increase in the work I'm doing, both academically and in the public sphere. Especially since COVID. COVID really ramped a lot of these issues up for people in a powerful way. One of the interesting things that COVID did is it threw people back onto their inner life. And what's interesting is our culture, especially North American culture, right? And I'm not the first to observe it. It has a high preponderance of a tendency towards narcissism, being very so people have oriented their lives in a very self-centered way, but they thought that, right? Or they can, maybe a better way of putting it, they confuse that with having deep, rich inner resources. And when everything sort of stopped and they couldn't focus the world on them and they had to focus on themselves in order to find resources, and what you found was a bifurcation, like a division. Some people were like, whoa, that really threw them. So I'll say something to you, and I'm of two minds of it, because I'm happy about it as a scientist because I made a prediction, and I'm sad about it as a human being because it's not a good prediction. So just as the pandemic was hitting, I said, what you're going to get is you're going to get a rise in a term that Julian Evans made famous called conspirituality, this mixture of conspiracy theories and spirituality, and that took off. And then I said, as we come out of the pandemic, we'll get a mental health spike, and then a little bit later, sort of an increase in crime. And all of these things are coming to pass because what had happened is many people are thrown into the interior life only to realize for all of the self-centeredness, they've actually not given any wise attention to their inner life, and they were suddenly without resources. Other people saw this as an opportunity, and they framed it that way. And so what's been springing up, where all of these online communities where people, not to sound too highfalutin or anything, but people started to say, I really want to cultivate wisdom. I mean, there's tons of information. There's a lot of bullshit mixed up with it. There's, there's all this stuff, and then there's science and that, but I want wisdom. And so, I've gotten involved with quite a few of these communities. So there's both, you have both negative and positive symptoms in the culture. The number of close friends people have is reliably declining, even for all of our social internet connections. Loneliness is becoming epidemic, and loneliness is it's very unhealthy. We are naturally social, cultural beings, and loneliness is
it's becoming a hobby too for some people in a way. It's becoming almost so common that it's like, or not common, but it's, I guess common, and once you start to become something, there's a part of you that will want to find the most organized way to be it and to engage in it.
Yes.
So even in loneliness, it's almost becoming a culture, It
is, but it's a culture with great cost. We have weird things happening, like the UK has set up a ministry of loneliness, which sounds like something out of Orwell, right? Like the ministry of loneliness.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, how did we get there?
Yeah, it sounds like an Ozzy Osbourne album.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
When it comes to searching for meaning, right? As a person, do we do it? Is it something that we do as individuals? Is there any value in finding meaning as an individual? It feels like to me sometimes more like the value is finding meaning as like a species or like a group, right? Like, I guess when I think about meaning, I don't think like, what is the meaning for me? What is the purpose of my life? I find my brain often thinks more like, what is our purpose, right? What is our meaning? Do you feel like if that one is more rewarding than the other, or what's the real value in, I don't know what I'm trying to ask, but can you help me?
I think I do. If you'll allow me to help you.
Yeah, please.
I'll try to be a little bit Socratic.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, good.
So,
Yeah.
one way of perhaps reframing it is that maybe there's like two poles to this problem, and they're actually interdependent. One half of the meaning issue is the fact that, and we can get into the the cognitive science of this. This is my cognitive science, but I'll just say it: the very processes that make you adaptively intelligent, like able to solve so many problems in so many domains in so many ways, those very processes make you perennially prone to self-deception. Like they're locked together.
I see what you're saying. So the same thing that makes you help you to figure something out is the same thing that keeps you in a certain space.
Right. So I won't get into the details of it right now, but like, for example, the primary problem your intelligence is there are two, in any problem you're trying to solve, there are two meta problems. I'll try not to use meta very often, but
okay. And meta means what?
Like they are above all the other problems you have to solve. You have to sort of solve these problems whenever you're trying to solve any other problem.
Got it. Understood.
Okay. So the first is, what should you pay attention to? And that sounds like a trivial, because what you can say is, well, it's obvious. And here's something, and I can back this up with a lot of argument and evidence. Getting a machine to find things obvious so that it would be a general problem solver is the goal of AGI.
Right.
So the fact that you find it obvious doesn't mean you can explain it. In fact, the fact that it is so obvious to you what you should be paying attention to is the miracle. Because think about it, Theo. Think about all the things you could be paying attention to in this room right now. Think of all the memory and information you have in the head, all the different ways you could combine them, all the different actions you could perform. You could be lifting an arm right now, right? And somehow, out of all of that, you ignore most of that information. And that information is like, it's titanically vast. Like, if you let me give you a small example, playing a game of chess. All the different possible pathways, all the different possible combinations for playing a game of chess, the number of those pathways exceeds the number of atomic particles in the universe.
Wow.
That's just for a little game of chess. Now look in your environment, all your long-term memory.
Right. And right now, my brain is locked in on it's shut all that other stuff out.
That's right.
To stay focused on, locked in on right here. That is pretty remarkable. You don't think about that. You just think, oh, I'm just locking in on what I'm thinking or looking at or whatever. But really, there's other stuff going on that's stopping all this other stuff from being like hitting the main inflection point in my brain.
That's right. And that's called framing.
Okay.
Right. And so what happens is it's you need this. This is and the ability to do this relevance realization. I use realization in both sense: become aware of and make real. Right. This is like core, and that's one of the meta abilities. The other is to anticipate your environment. In fact, we judge how intelligent a creature is by how much it can anticipate the future. So, for example,
oh yeah, of course.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so you have this anticipation problem. Now, those two problems are interlocked, because think about it. The more into the future I have to anticipate, the more that explosion of possibilities opens up. The relevance realization issue. What do I pay attention to? So you're just paying attention in this moment. If you also have to pay attention and think about what I need to do an hour from now, 3 hours tomorrow, Thursday, do you see how it opens up?
It'd be very scary, yeah.
Yeah. So you are adaptive, right, in ignoring. The thing that's making us ignore also sometimes makes us ignore what turns out to be relevant.
I see.
And it gets even more pronounced as we're dealing with anticipating the future. This is why getting people to save for their retirement. So this is an experiment that was done. You go in with all the best evidence. You go into academics. We pretend we're the smartest people, and we're supposed to be responsive to evidence and argument. You give them argument and evidence. You should start saving for your retirement right now. Here's all the charts. Here's all the graphs. You allow them to make any challenges they want. You can absolutely convince them. They all agree. You come back in 6 months, and none of them are saving. Now, here's what you can do that makes a difference, right? You come back and you say, you know what? I want you to imagine, don't just think, I want you to imagine your future self as a beloved family member that you've always taken care of and you feel a compassionate concern for. And I want you to imagine that as much as you can. You come back in 6 months and you find two things. When they're imagining, they start to save. And the more vividly they imagine, the more they save. Right? Because you can't just deal with the truth. You have to deal with the salience, how things catch your attention.
I see what you're saying. So you have to not only have like this idea, but if you can add like weight and girth and make it that idea as vivid as possible, so it's almost present.
That's right.
Like the future is almost, if you're able to find a way, like a bridge to make it more present, then people are able to behave maybe in more positive or effective ways in planning for it.
That's right. So I call that an ecology of practices. All the practices support each other and checked and balanced, and they have complementary strengths and weaknesses. Remember, each thing that makes you adaptive has a dark side, and what you do is you try and pair them so that they correct for each other's dark sides, right? You get an ecology of practices. And across cultures and across time, you see people coming up with these ecologies of practices for overcoming the self-deception and for increasing that sense of connectedness. And I'll talk about that in a sec if you'd like, right? And that's wisdom. And so the individual pole is you need to cultivate wisdom. But what's the collective pole? And you put your finger on it. So what is this meaning thing? So if you do research on it, there's 4 dimensions to it. And the one that people think it's synonymous with is having a purpose. That's only one of the dimensions. It's actually not the most important one.
Of the dimensions of meaning.
Of meaning in life. So we're not talking about like the meaning of a sentence. We're talking about what makes your life worth living, even though it has all the frustrations and failures and faults and flaws in it.
Right, because I think especially you get to like a middle of your life kind of, or ballpark, and that really starts to hit home. You're like, oh, well, my youth is disappearing.
Yeah.
What is my purpose here? And then is it the purpose of just me, or am I part of a group and we have a purpose? Those are the questions, that I really kind of see us getting hit with a lot. So what happens historically in a time where we get to a place like this? Has this happened before in time?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't need to be alarmed at the point like humans have never been through this.
That's right. We've been through it before. Now, there's two stances on this that are both sort of wrong because they're extreme. One is, human beings have always said the meanings and it's a dismissive thing. And then the other one is, no, this is completely, absolutely unique. And there's truth to both. What's unique is we face a set of problems that are global in a way that was never global problems that were this complex and growing. Like we face an interconnection of the advent of, AGI. We're already facing, the growing impact of social media. People are looking at issues around the environment, energy. As you said, our political economic system is breaking down. It's gridlocking, and people are losing faith in it. And I use that word deliberately in a deep way. And so those are, I think, unique things we're facing. And I think. When we're in a meaning crisis, it sort of hamstrings us. It really weakens our ability to turn our best wisdom towards these problems. Because when we're in a meaning crisis, right? So,
especially now if we're all isolated and
we're isolated and
it's not our best. It's very self-motivated. It's not our like group conscience. We're acting out of fear, a lot of people.
Yeah, and we're acting out of like, and our ability to cut through the bullshit and to realize when we're in self-deception is, being seriously challenged.
Oh, yeah. Do you think we used to get so much more out of that just in our system? Because if it seems like these things that you're speaking of are things that seem like necessities to our soul,
They are.
Like nothing seems more thirsty these days than like our soul. Like whatever. There's like I almost can feel this part of underneath me a lot of times, just almost like my soul is trying to order like Oxycons or something. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
what am I even doing here anymore? If these are the practices we're doing a lot of times, it's like you can start to feel it feels bored, or it feels like thirsty. That's a better word. It doesn't feel bored. It feels thirsty.
Well, thirsty, but it can vacillate between profound boredom and extreme anxiety. Like, so you get and by the way, thirst, that's the word that's actually used in the Buddhist scriptures for what's usually translated as desire. It's more like thirst and craving. It's not simple desire.
Yeah.
And that craving, when it's that reciprocal narrowing, it's identifying in a mindless fact. It's all that stuff we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
We become selves through each other, and so the soul is perhaps. I'm trying to rehabilitate these terms so we can re-inhabit them, and there's a connection between those two words: rehabilitate, re-inhabit. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to rehabilitate the notion of soul. This is how this is our deep connectedness to our embodiment, to our groundedness. Our self is our deep connectedness to each other, and our spirit is our deep connectedness to the vertical, to what is ultimate. And if we could bring those back so that they can be simultaneously scientifically understood, remember Socrates, and spiritually transformatively real for us again, then we can do that nourishment you were talking about.
And I think it's going to become, it's a necessity. I think
it is.
That's what I think. I don't know if that part of us can die. The part of us that is desperate for just like this understanding or this comfort or this peace, not even like the comfort of a blanket or but the comfort of just some connection to this greater energy that we're supposed to be like working with.